The biggest risk you could take right now is doing nothing and just pretending AI is not coming, because we can't turn it off. Because if you're 40 years old and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to retire at 65, which inevitably they're not going to, because first of all, you won't be able to afford to live from 65 to 95, and 30 years on potentially won't be a pension of its type as it is today. What will you do if you're not still connected to the world?
Frances Valintine, a tech visionary, a disruptor in education. She spent 3 decades challenging the way we teach, learn and lead. She's won dozens of awards and accolades and has been named one of the most innovative people in New Zealand. She's a founder of AcademyEX and MindLab Ventures, reshaping futures across New Zealand. As you see things naturally ahead of time.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. I sometimes wish I didn't, because sometimes I feel like I'm talking and people are looking at me like she's on another planet. My intention was never to disrupt for the sake of disruption, but make things relevant. The world is not the place that we grew up, but the complexity of young children in this world where they've seen social media, they understand sustainability, they understand climate change, they understand geopolitics, they see war. In New Zealand, you didn't see those things. Kids are grappling with things, and in turn, teachers are grappling with how to look at that. And not to mention anxiety. How can we make this better?
What do you think is the biggest thing that's happening to us right now?
AI is bigger than the internet. So if you're 40 years old and you're choosing not to kind of adopt technologies of our time, you get left behind. We can't turn it off.
Quick one. Mina here. Thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. One thing that you can do for me is to please hit the subscribe button below. I promise you that if you hit subscribe, I'm going to work hard to make sure that my episodes are really good, that will get better and better. So, do we have a deal? Okay, back to the episode. Yeah, so what made me really happy about looking at your Instagram the other day, there was a video of you in the plane looking over the window and saying how proud you were for being in delegation with the Prime Minister, and how you felt really proud about representing New Zealand to talk about or have discussions about technology, about all sorts of things that you were going to be discussing with this country. And I think it was Thailand?
There's a delegation to Thailand, Singapore and the Philippines last year.
And I can almost feel the proudness.
Oh, I am a very proud Kiwi. Like, I really am. And I'm also an optimist. So so even when things, maybe we're in darker times, I still see the good possibilities. So that's just who I am.
There are many, many different ways. I mean, we've just we usually have trailers for our episodes, and a trailer that we have just played now would have described you how we perceive you. How do you want the world to see you as Frances?
I don't think I really think about that. I think a lot about legacy. Like, I think a lot about when I'm not here. Yeah. And will I have had an impact that has benefited the world and people, and making sure it's on the positive side of the ledger, not did I detract from the world. Yeah. But I don't really think about it so much when I'm here, just to be good and have good people around me. I mean, that's fundamentally, and because I'm a lifelong passionate learner. Yeah. I'm always thinking about, anybody I see who I think, oh, so much potential, and I want to support people to take that next step so that they can be whoever they want to be. And I think that everybody has that capacity. It's just they've got to get the confidence. And so that's the bit I really love focusing on. It's like, what would take someone from where they are now to where they want to be? And actually, can you help map out those steps?
I have 3 words that came to mind when I was preparing for this chat, and they are innovation, disruption, and boldness. And they exemplify you, I think. And these words, maybe more, of course, but you must have come from an oven, cooked in an oven background, that the way that you were brought up have helped you become who you are today, to become that visionary, legacy-minded individual that you are.
It's hard to say. When I was very young, I grew up on a very small farm, and I was very painfully shy, like extraordinarily so. And where people really can't imagine it, because I do a lot of public speaking now. I'm on conferences around the world regularly, that I never stood on a stage until I was 40. So people have assumed that my entire life has been on a stage, but actually quite the opposite. I was so introverted and actually in my own world and trying to do things almost out of sight of people. Yeah. Which is really strange to think back now, where I've developed a good understanding that that actually you can influence positively at scale if you stand on a stage, as opposed to having one-to-one conversations all the time, which a lot of education is, small groups. But my childhood was on a farm, I think, makes you highly adaptable, because you can't just go down to the shop to get something. You have to constantly fix things and problem solve and fill the time. I mean, I think a lot of young people today, one of the things I think is really sad is they've lost the ability to be bored. Because when you're bored, you think, your mind thinks about new things, you're highly creative, you have to come up with things to pass the time. And I'm sure the same with you. Growing up, when you're bored, you start, you create some of the most amazing things, and that's where and even if you go in to read books or making scrapbooks, or you start to build something or create a playhouse or whatever it might be. I think having to fill gaps of boredom with creativity is a really great way to kind of be resilient and actually think about how you want to spend your time on the planet.
Because you see things naturally ahead of time.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. I sometimes wish I didn't, because sometimes I feel like I'm talking and people are looking at me like she's on another planet.
Because I was just going to say, what's that like when you have that ability? And was it naturally given to you, or did you work on it? And how do people respond? How do you find the response to the blank faces of when people look at you going, I can't see it as you can see it? It's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't see things as, and I'm not like voodoo doodoo. I'm a natural researcher. So the more information you have, and the more you look at the association between information and data insights, and the more you talk to people, you start to kind of pull this information together, and you can start to see how it converges. And when you see that convergence, you can't unsee it, and you go, oh, so if these things come together, that is going to affect whatever it might be. So a great example today, of course, is AI. You don't need to go very far to go, okay, where people start to use AI and productivity gains start to kick in, then people are going to say, well, we don't need certain skill sets, so we won't hire graduates, or we won't replace that person when they leave. And then you can start going, well, if that happens, then how do you get people who are young into the workforce? And then how do you get people who are building skills for later, for succession planning? But then you start thinking about the economy and saying, well, then what happens if we have a smaller tax base? And, so that you extrapolate out. So for me, I can sit there, and it's almost like a big mind map. It's like, if this happens, then this. So it's a logic flow. And so, I do sometimes, I realize I'm with people and they're sitting there looking at me like, okay, you lost me 40 minutes ago. So I'm having now to think about, how do I convey those? It's like stories, it's storytelling in a way that people can stay along with the story.
Because, before I even read too much about yourself, all I needed to do was, in order of date, look at all the awards that you've won, because that's how many there were. I had to actually categorize them by year to keep like, okay, this happened there and that happened.
Yeah, I tell you, it's really scary though when you get Lifetime Achievement Awards, because you're going, hang on, my life's just starting. Whoa, hang on, wait. So I have had a couple of those where I've gone, I'm not sure, maybe it's too early for this. Like,
they need to change that wording.
I think so. There's lots of words they need to change, like redundancy. Like, that's the worst. You've been made redundant. Like, there are things I just go, why do we have that word?
Yeah, I love it. And I really hope that you get to change those words, and all these words get to change, and someone's listening having that impact can change that, because how we say things really matter, and it's probably part of the way that we are who we are today, right? So some of the problems that futurists, technologists, and an entrepreneur like yourself experience is frustration, because I can see in that year 1992, in 2000 and something, you won this because you achieved that, and I could see that you were thinking about what's happening 5 years down the track, and you already achieved it, and you got acknowledged because, wow, you've done that, and later on you get the recognition, but at the start you don't. And at the start, you get actually rejection and pushback. How did you feel with that pushback and the challenges that you're faced with many things like the school system and all the rest of it?
I mean, first of all, I think you never, ever go into anything thinking you're going to get an award. I think that's the thing. Is the awards are always obviously spontaneous and you're really surprised. And I think no one ever expects. The type of people who typically do big things don't expect it. But the beginning stage when things are hard, you know, you do have to have a really good network of people around you to remind you that the mission you're on is a good mission. And I do think everybody has that. The self-doubt comes in all the time. And you know, it's an overused term in some ways, but imposter syndrome is a real thing where you think you're not as good as you are.
Do you experience imposter syndrome?
Still, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah,
no way.
And I experience
so you're human as well. You're not a future robot.
No. I experience, and I think a lot of people just assume that when you sort of a certain stage and age in your career that you don't, but the pressure is even more sometimes.
Wow, really?
Because you actually, you know, you're wanting to stay relevant. And even now it's interesting as I get older, because I'm focused around technology, you know, there are people who will have kind of thrown remarks about my age and technology, and you can't do that forever. And I'm like,
really? Okay.
Wow, you're already sort of putting me into a time capsule of,
you
know,
a
woman of a certain age cannot do. I mean, first of all, it was a female, you know, like a female in technology. Now it's sort of like a woman of my age in technology. And I think it's so interesting. And of course, in those moments, you think, who am I fooling? You know, like, what am I doing here? And you do have that. And then, of course, you know, with good people around you, you're reminded that actually you still have huge impact and you still have relevancy. And actually there's decades and decades ahead of me of things I can do, albeit they may be slightly different over time. But there's no end. It's not like suddenly I've done enough of this, I think I'll stop. You know, that's not who I am.
I'm so happy that you do not pay attention to these comments and you carry on. I think that's maybe your secret sauce, they call them here, that you are someone who marches ahead. And I felt a little bit like that when I was like trying to understand your mindset. I want to get inside the mindset, the brain of Frances. What's happening in there?
Good luck.
That's the reaction I get from many people when I say that. What sort of mindset does a person that needs to have, who's listening to this podcast right now, who's needs to upskill, needs to learn a new skill, needs to be in that digital space, because you have to. It's a given, right? So talk to me about that.
Look, I think the best skill anyone can have if they're in that journey of learning new skills or changing their life is consistency. So you figure out what you can manage in a day. So you might say, I'm going to spend half an hour a day online on a new course, or doing some online learning, or reading a book, or doing something, and you commit to it, and you take the size of a commitment you can manage. So you might say half an hour, and you decide that's going to be daily or 3 times a week or whatever it might be, and you stick with it. So that consistently adding is very additive, because actually learning is particularly interesting because it's not totally linear. When you learn things, you build. It's like it's scaffolding. It builds on top of knowledge, and it's not like each bit of knowledge stands alone. It builds on previous knowledge. It's like vocabulary. You know, as you know some words, you bring new words in. You can start building bigger words, and so consistency is a human trait that actually a lot of people have but don't utilize, or it's also one that goes really quickly. So when you talk to anyone who's tried to get really fit or lose weight, or even leave a job, and they're like, I need to sort of plan it. I need to kind of have like this is a big decision. But you need a consistent plan, and you need to stick with the plan. And there'll be days when you think, okay, maybe not today. And actually giving yourself a bit of a break on those not today, but being consistent and getting back into that. And so when it comes to learning, it is about how much time can you manage. And the more you learn, actually what's great, your endorphins kick in. And your brain goes, hey, this is really interesting, and I'm talking to really interesting people, and I'm learning things that I didn't understand, but now I understand. That's a great kind of motivator, because then you go, I want some more of this, and I want some more of this. And then actually in my day job, developing professionals and extending their knowledge. I see it all the time when people get into learning going, oh, I'm not sure I can manage this with my job. And then a year later, they're still learning going, oh, I can't imagine life without learning. It changes really quickly. And I think that's the beauty of the brain and humans is we can carve out time and be disciplined and we can do whatever we want, but we do have to find the commitment in the first place because there's always going to be Netflix and Instagram to distract us. Yeah.
And do you get distracted by these things?
Oh, of course. Yeah, but I'm pretty ruthless about turning them off and have rules around it. Only because I've seen too many people go down that path actually, the addiction aspect of it is so profound that actually it can be quite life-changing in a negative way. So, I'm of the view that small doses of great content is great, but actually if you're just literally just scrolling and doing really not engaged with it, it's really just kind of passing time, then it's time to put them down and move on. Like I actually started something on Netflix last night. I watched 3 or 4 minutes and thought, why am I watching this? This is really, I'm not going to gain anything from this, and just turned it off and thought, it's done.
You have to speak to yourself almost. You have to have a bit of a chat with yourself.
I think it's good to talk to yourself. I mean, whether you say it out loud or just in your head, just that kind of self-discipline that when you know you're doing something, it's a bit like so many things where you might be talking to someone and you're like, it's not resonating the way you're trying to communicate something, they're not getting it. And in my head, I'm going, okay, how do I simplify this, or how do I change this, or how do I approach this from a different way? And it's almost like 2 channels working at the same time. Like one's saying something, the other one's going, change it up. It's not, change the channel because it's not resonating.
Interesting.
And I think that kind of in your own head talking to yourself is quite good.
Interesting. So you have to be your own counselor, your own personal trainer, your own cheerleader.
We all are, I think. I think we all have a little bit of that in us.
Who's the cheerleader in your life that you look up to?
Oh, like a lot of people, I have an amazing family, people who, but they also keep me real because they're the same people who can tell me as it is. They're not, they will tell me if it's like a bad idea or I'm overdoing it or kind of step back from stuff that, so I think you need those people who are like your best friends who are like, yeah, it's okay idea, but it's not your best idea. You need those people so they can bring you back. And then people beyond that, I mean, I'm, a huge reader and podcasts. I mean, I'm constant on podcasts listening. I'm just,
okay. What are you listening to, if I may ask?
Oh my goodness, I listen to such an eclectic kind of, everything from really high tech things that a lot of people will be like, what do you listen to these for? Right through, politics, fun stuff, everybody, it's just a little bit local news, international news, perspectives, history, not much fiction, but don't sort of focus too much. But I still, like there's an element. Even a good crime podcast, on holiday is a good something to pass the time. But I think for me, you can have podcasts going while you do so many other things. You can be in the garden or out walking or cooking or driving. Whereas I think other forms of media, reading a book, I've got to be obviously in a time and place where that allows me to stop everything else to do that. Yeah. So I think the whole genre of podcasting has amplified learning in so many people because they can do it anywhere, on the train to work. So it's great.
It's fascinating. And talking about learning, you obviously a pioneer in how education is done in New Zealand. And if you can talk to me about that journey in a way maybe that it hasn't been told before, which is sometimes like, ooh, a new way of talking about it. I want to learn about AcademyEX and your journey that has brought you to AcademyEX, and what do you make of it now? Why all of this?
So, I mean, this is my 30th year in education, and I never thought I was going to be an educator. In fact, it didn't cross my mind. Although, ironically, if I look back, there is educators through my entire generations. If I go back, every generation in my family has people who were leading institutes. So in some ways it's inevitable I was going to be in education because we're a family of educators. But they were always pioneering. They never had a typical way of education. So, but I always thought I was going to be in design. I always thought there'd be some other journey for me. But it just time, place, opportunity, a whole bunch of things took me on a path. And I am a bit of a believer that the world provides you what you need, and so the journey sort of started to unfold. It meant I had to think about education, and then I had to think about my own upbringing in education, which in its time was very typical, small primary school, tiny in the country, moved to Auckland, maybe a few high schools in the process. And for the record, not because I got kicked out of high schools, but because I just couldn't find the one that really made sense to me.
Okay.
And I was a very studious student, but I also was a creative student. So I was wanting ways and thinking about things differently. And I love things that are applied. Like I like rolling up my sleeves and doing things. And so by the time I got to being an adult, I was really thinking about, why is education stayed the same? How do people learn? And anyhow, that came to another leading other institutes before AcademyEX, and then actually the precursor to AcademyEX was the Mind Lab, which was for children. And actually at the time my children were relatively young, and they were sort of still pre-teen, and I was looking at their schooling and going, wow, it's exactly like my schooling, and yet we're living in this digital time. And that was from the late 90s, so they're now well into their late 20s. But it's so interesting to see things hadn't shifted, and yet the world had shifted around. And so I was coming home and using all sorts of technologies and actually, tinkering in so much great tech from even back then, going back over, say, 25 years ago, AR and VR and AI and doing things. And my kids were like, wow, this is great. And we'd be doing things. And yet everybody around them was like still carrying their textbooks to school.
Right.
So it really came from that point of view of understanding. So I didn't actually go formally into studying education until basically it was just before I was 40. So at that point I realized it was probably more than just this career was going to be my life, that I was going to end up in this idea of learning and teaching, and the future of work was evolving that way, and that would probably be a big chunk of my life's work. So I then formalized it. But my intention was never to disrupt for the sake of disruption, but make things relevant and also contextualize, and saying the world is not the place that we grew up in. And parents actually sometimes are the biggest challenge, because if the school system served them well, then they think, well, it should just be like that. Let's do math the same old way we did it, and we should do this and have this, and the focus on numeracy and literacy, and maybe not some of the other things. But what I think parents don't see is, yes, numeracy, literacy is just as important, but the complexity of young children in this world where they've seen social media has brought all the kind of the ills of the world right into their phone. They've seen things that they understand sustainability, they understand climate change, they understand geopolitics, they see war, they've got visibility of things which we never experience as young people, unless you were another market. But in New Zealand, you didn't see those things. You lived in this sort of idyllic little world. And now, kids are grappling with things, and in turn, teachers are grappling with how to kind of look at that. And not to mention anxiety and all the other things that go with living as a young person. So the whole way through is saying, how can we make this better? Like, how do we just improve on learning and making it far more joyful and interesting?
Yeah. So you're clearly very big on lifelong learning and future-proofing professionals. I have a note here to say, there's a purpose-led disruption. You're not just trying to change things up because you want to shake things up a little bit. There's actually a purpose behind it. And the purpose is that the world is moving. That things are moving, things are changing, aren't they? So AI is big. You were talking about in one of the interviews that internet was the biggest thing that has ever happened to us.
30 years ago.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest thing that's happening to us right now?
Oh, AI is bigger than the internet. It's, so I think you could go the internet 30 years ago, smartphones, 2007, and then 2022 when generative AI became mainstream. But the difference is this is changing so rapidly, and it's at the same time when there is a global economy that is looking for better, faster, cheaper, and there's a whole endless growth. People are looking to speed things up, reduce workforces, higher productivity, higher profits, which none of which I think is the right model, but at the same time that is the world we operate in. So the adoption rate is high because there's very little friction, because you can use AI without paying for anything. As long as you have a device, basically there's a lot of free tools. Majority are either free or very low cost by comparison to every other technology. And you think about the internet, you had to have a whole bunch of things. You had to have modems and a computer and a telco account, and you had to kind of share a line. You had to, all the things that even before you started. And then, of course, you had to have a website to go to. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. So AI is not like that. And the challenge is every industry, even podcasting, you can, get podcasts made now, and it's, within minutes of artificial generated voices on a topic of your choosing. And while you'd hope the vast majority of people would see that as not a great experience, actually they get better all the time. And of course, it's the same thing. It was only a few years ago that I felt that creatives, songwriters, videographers, storytellers, I always thought that they were like the precious little snowflakes that would never be touched by AI because it was human creativity at its best. All of those have been disrupted by AI completely. Likewise, so have lawyers and professional service firms and medical practitioners and, take your pick. It's everywhere. And so lifelong learning this is the biggest challenge as a working adult we've ever had, because if you're 40 years old and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to retire at 65, which inevitably they're not going to, because first of all, you won't be able to afford to live from 65 to 95 and 30 years on potentially won't be a pension of its type as it is today. But also, if you think about what will you do if you're not still connected to the world? So if you're 40 years old and you're choosing not to kind of adopt technologies of our time, you get left behind not just in the job, but in your communities. So my work is really focused on saying to people, the biggest risk you could take right now is doing nothing and just pretending the AI is not coming, because we can't turn it off, which is another topic in itself, because obviously if it gets better at the rate it is over the last few years, where it will be in 2 years' time is pretty mind-boggling in terms of what the capabilities will be. And then, of course, all the questions, what will humans do and how will we afford to live? So you get into a pretty doomsday question or, kind of place pretty quickly. So I, again, keep thinking of the optimistic, positive side of AI, but it only works if people know how to use it and don't just become products of, who don't understand how to use it and they're just using it without understanding the complexities or the risks around it.
Because what sort of danger are we talking about here if you don't learn AI?
Well, I mean, the first thing, AI is across everything. So if you're a social media, you're already part of an algorithm. Your microphones are on your phone. You've got all these companies already transcribing everything you say and do. So it knows everything about you. It's selling your data constantly to these large companies. And so when you go online, you're only seeing a curation based upon an algorithm by a tech company, whatever it is, whether it's a social media or a retailer or whatever it might be. So you're already in that. And of course, then it reinforces your views. And then if you get reinforced views, actually you get very narrow in your thinking, and then the world becomes scary because actually you have a view that feels like everybody else is crazy. Like, how could they have a sort of a counter view to you? Secondly, if you go in that, you become less employable because people need broad thinkers and problem solvers. And actually there's a whole, ability, when you get deeply disconnected from the world because AI is kind of manipulating you, you stop seeing some of the things that you need to know, and you start thinking that the knowledge you have is still pertinent and relevant for today, and it's not. It keeps changing. So at the very worst, you become a product of AI, and your data is sold. There is, on the flip side, if you use AI wisely and you understand how to use it, then obviously you can see how it's changing the things you do, whatever job you're in, what communities you're in, and you actually can be at the front of it and actually kind of helping shape the utilization, shape how it might be benefiting, and actually, the benefits of it become really accessible. But it's kind of one or the other. There's not really a happy medium where you kind of sort of know it but don't really. It's one you have to jump in.
And at the start of someone's career, if someone listening to this maybe in their 40s, because I think number 40 came up a little bit, haven't got a clue about what they should be learning, what advice would you give them?
So if you think about in your 40s, so between when you're born and 40, it's pretty prescribed. You're born around 5 years old, you go to school, you go through the school system, you either then leave and get a job or you go into further studies. At some point you might find a life partner, you may choose to have children, you sort of have certain things, your parents get of a certain age, life has a rhythm. When you get to 40 though, a lot of those things you start to question, because now between 40 and 65, the sort of, the kind of idyllic retirement age, there isn't a plan, because actually everybody's in a very different place at 40. Some people are grandparents, some people are, starting families, some people are choosing not to have families, some people are traveling or changing careers. It's sort of the Wild West when you get to 40. And it's really interesting within AcademyEX, the average age of all our students is 44. And it's not surprising. It's because it's a point in time when people reflect and they start to think about, do they want to do this for the rest of their life? And often the career they've chosen, the place they live, maybe their partner, things that have sort of just unfolded, now they start to be in their driving seat and going, actually, I need to do something about this. So going back to learning, I always say to people, you should always do something that really makes you feel the time passes quickly. So things that you enjoy, time passes really quickly. So if your happy place is you're sitting at a potter's wheel doing pottery, and that's then you'll know that potentially you're a creative person, and you've got a certain type of way you're wired and things, and you're hands on, versus somebody who says, oh, give me a spreadsheet, and I'd be lost in a spreadsheet all day long. And you might not have been someone who trained as an accountant, and you might suddenly go, I kind of want to get into business or whatever it might be. It's really thinking about what will sustain your interest, because it's harder to learn as you're older. So you do need to have something that you're really passionate about, but it is really a time when you get to choose who you want to be. And we're running a campaign at the moment called Because You're Not Done Yet, which is this idea, just because you're an adult, you're not done. Just because you're in your 40s, you're not done yet. Like, actually, this is the beginning of your next career. Like, this is the beginning and shaping of what you want to be for the next phase in your life. And for most people, that phase in their 40s will be 20, 30 years. It's a pretty big chunk of life, because it's probably bigger than the phase leading up from, say, university or tertiary studies up until their 40s. So you've actually got a bigger amount of years ahead of you, given longevity and the way people are working. Now in New Zealand, half the people at 70 are still working. So it's the largest population of people 70 working in the world. And it's partially our lifestyle now enables that. People can work, and we don't have the high pressure and the transport population issues. We don't have some of the other things that other countries might have at that stage. And in some countries, they actually force retirement earlier because there's a huge population. So, we need more people, so we hire people much older in their life. But it does mean we get to choose. So I always say to people in their 40s, it's like, what's a restart look like? It's like a reboot. Like, if you were a new mobile phone, what features would you have instead of the one you had a few years ago?
I love that.
Yeah. Like, what would you add? What apps features would you have on your phone?
I love that.
And so starting again is thinking about, how would I learn those skills? And they could become so many different ways of learning today. Like, there's so much more choice than there ever was and before kind of the internet and the way the world is shaped up now. Yeah.
And what's sort of the first steps that someone can take to practically nail it down or narrow it down as well, to figure out what's the next step?
I mean, the first thing would be, what type of learning is accessible to you? So, if you're working full-time, obviously, and you don't have a lot of, maybe in a region that doesn't have a lot of options, then you're going to be looking at online learning. Then it's saying online, is it going to be live online, like facilitated sessions online with, somebody who's actually teaching online live, or are you self-paced? Now, most people are really bad at teaching themselves, including me. So I like an interactive. I like to have someone who's facilitating, so that I can learn in that way. And then it's like, if you have got great institutes around you and you do have the time to go, what time of day, when would be, what type of learning, and is a qualification important? Like, do you want to have, for example, a master's degree? Do you want to undertake a first-time undergrad degree and do a bachelor degree? Are you thinking about a PhD? Like, it's having to think about what, if you're wanting something more substantial, you're thinking about it for the portability maybe of working in other countries. Like, if you might be thinking, I want to go somewhere, but I need a master's degree, which is a limit of many visas of having higher qualifications. Or you might be doing it just because it's fun. Like, it might just be, hey, I just want to learn more about sustainability, because in my next phase of my life, I want to be a better human and actually do more for the environment. So it's about the motivation. I mean, where people come to us, it's typically because they are looking to either improve their career advancement or change completely to a different type of career. And so it's a very mindful kind of in their head conversation about, what do I want, and then find the program. What we've done with AcademyEX is really focusing on that group. 99% of our students are working full time. So, which means that they're finding time amongst their schedule to keep learning, and by having that niche, it means that we focus entirely on that demographic, which is why we end up with much older students because of age and stage. And we recognise there are plenty of other institutes who are focused on, younger students or full-time students who are not working. So, it's about looking at all the options and saying which one of these is best for me. And then starting small. Don't go, if you're not sure about learning, don't go into the biggest thing first. Just delve into something really light and kind of fun. It could be art classes. It could be literally, cabinet making or cake making or whatever it might be, but just get your brain back into the idea of learning something that you haven't done before.
Love that. And what's the aim here? What's the goal for you? Why doing all this?
I just can't imagine not doing it. I think that's the answer is I don't think about why I do it, but if I ever think about not doing it, that's sort of, it feels like I can't imagine a moment where, whether it be in this institute or other work I do, it will always be around empowering people to be who they want to be. And that's always been the thing for me is this empowerment piece. I mentor young leaders in India, particularly female leaders. I mentor young people who are starting their career. I have groups of friends that we mentor each other and actually, have hard conversations and kind of guidance and things. I just feel like to be human and sharing, if you have a knowledge or you have a skill, to share it is the most logical thing to do. And I keep hoping that I'll be doing that with, great-grandchildren one day and helping them kind of navigate the world that they have and sharing it. So it's just who I am.
Quickly, AI is here and it's disrupting all of us, disrupting our work, our play, and our businesses. You either learn about it and know how to apply, or you get left behind. Simple as that. So my friends at AcademyEX are running 10-week masterclass called Disruptive Technologies. It is going to teach you how to use AI and tech to shape your future and to walk away with skills that you can use immediately at work. This is so important to stay ahead of the curve, something that we talk about a lot on the show. So why wait? Click the link in the description and sign up. The course begins August 19th. Okay, back to the episode. I want to ask about passion, because passion is fueling you. And the reason why you have come so far is because of many things. Maybe vision, passion, drive, even though you've had many challenges, of course. And, because your journey from media school, right, to
media design school.
Design school. And what was after that you've had?
Then it became the Mind Lab.
There was an interesting story about media design school. I wonder if you're able to tell us about, what made the transition between media design school to starting Mind Lab.
Well, I'm not sure which particular one, but the Mind Lab was actually a master's project for me. So I was studying at the University of Melbourne.
Right.
And I had to come up with a project. And so my project was what if I was to start a new institute? Well, I was still a CEO of Media Design School. And I was thinking about, so that was
was there something in the Media Design School that maybe you weren't able to express, like new ideas or
I think
disruption?
I realized that as I was getting older, I wanted to teach older students. I sort of felt selfishly. Right. I love being surrounded by people who are thinking. And I always laugh because I say, basically, when I was first started at Media Design School, I was still in my 20s and my students were too. Right. And then I continued into my 30s. I was there for nearly 15 years. And then when I got to my 40s, I suddenly went, I think all my students should be in their 40s. Mm-hmm. And now I'm saying, I'll probably start an institute for 60-year-olds when I get to 60. And maybe one at 70, and it would just be for retirees. Yeah. And, I have this view that I like to be around people. And just before I came here, I was in AcademyEX, and we had on site today, I don't know, maybe 80 students on site who are doing their master's degrees. And they were all having a break for lunch. And the noise alone, this conversations, it's so amplified. It's like this really, and everybody's connecting and everyone's having a good time. And you're like, this is what learning should look like. But it was also, think of all those conversations that have been carried out in that room. So 80 different conversations potentially, or at least 40 different conversations, 80 people. And all those conversations are going to lead to new opportunities or new insights. And if they didn't have that, if those people were in their day job and they were sitting at their desk having lunch, none of those things would happen. And so a lot of good comes from when people get together. And I think one of the downsides of post-COVID is we don't spend enough time together. And actually, if you don't spend that, all the insights and all the sparks of motivation and suddenly getting like, wow, this, you get so much from energy from other people. And I think that's another big part of when you connect people in learning is they literally can sit over a sandwich at lunchtime and suddenly go, oh, I see a different way of handling the issue I'm dealing with. And actually your insight's just given me a spark of kind of imagination, and I'm going to do something differently. And you can't fake excitement when you're in those environments. So you walk in, you go, these people, age 35 to probably 60 are like all sparking, and they're all just excited about what they're doing. And that is such an excitement kind of thing for me to see.
Isn't it cool that you get to be part of that and play a role?
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me just incredibly happy to see people engaged with conversations and learning.
It's fascinating with the COVID and the amount of we're not talking to each other as much, right? You just mentioned that. I find it fascinating, and I would love for you to give me thoughts about how can I meet more people, engage with more people, perhaps talking to the people that are engaging with AcademyEX or want to engage with a new type of learning, and they want to engage in a course or a postgrad or something like that into understanding the digital space and AI. How can they be in a community to strengthen their journey and help them along?
Yeah, look, I think one of the COVID or no COVID, as people get older, they have less friends. It's just the reality that they go through phases. Men in particular, they typically whittle down their friends to 2 or 3 mates, and in some cases 1. And women's time with friends becomes more infrequent and actually much harder to meet. If you're looking for someone as a life partner, almost impossible. It gets really hard because people kind of get set in their ways. And the problem when you have friend groups or family groups is you typically cover the same terrain because it's safe. You talk about similar things. It's a bit like having comfort food. Comfort conversations and rituals of family or friends are actually part of feeling safe and secure, but it doesn't mean you expand your thinking and your connections. So if you think about it, it's even the rise of online dating is to address just either loneliness or people trying to connect outside of the groups of people they already know. And so in a modern day, the phenomenon is majority of people meet someone, their life partner, online, not in person. And so we have the ability with learning to be part of a community. And I think that's, you can be on a community online, but it's not the same as being a community when you physically meet each other and you hang out together. So a big part of our pushback after COVID was getting people back offline and physically getting them back into learning. Even though we do still a lot of learning online, we make sure that our, all the cohorts of students all actually meet regularly in person and actually have those connections. And that's where so many of those opportunities merge and form. And I do think, loneliness is a real issue for the world. It's a problem to solve. It's a really big, in all age groups. Right. We also have less people being able to find that person they want to spend their life with. A lot less people having the sort of traditional family, and not just because they're choosing not to, which is a lot of people, but because they can't find those people, because it's people are kind of hidden away a lot more. And I always laugh because I heard recently that New Zealand has the earliest dinner time now in the world, which is restaurants used to be pre-COVID, like 7:30 was the sort of the biggest time. Everybody wanted to book dinner for 7:30, 8 o'clock at night with friends, and now it's 5:30. And I'm like, 5:30 dinners, like we're becoming like my nana. It's like, it's almost like, it's almost afternoon tea time, and it just feels like even our city feels to me like a city of 200,000 people, not a city of nearly 1.8 million. And where is the activity? And if you go out at 10 o'clock at night, you feel almost intimidated by how empty the streets are.
At 12 p.m, it's empty.
Completely empty. And if you ask a restaurant if you can go and book it, go in for dinner at 9 o'clock, they're like, oh, the kitchen is closed. Like this does not make it easy for people to find others and communicate, which again comes back to how do you find new communities who don't just agree and cover the same terrain. And so a learning community is ideal because you have sustained periods where your job is to talk And particularly in my case with my institute is postgraduate studies is all about talking to each other, and it's all about debate and conversation and things. It's not about somebody at the front of a class teaching. You're not taught content and then having to remember it. You're actually developing opinions and testing hypotheses, and you're doing things quite differently. But I do think, particularly if you've landed in a new country, so let's say you've just arrived in New Zealand and you've moved from Italy and you came here without anybody else, the fastest way to find a community would be to go into learning, not to necessarily just going onto an app and connecting. And even if you say, well, you join a sports club, that's great, but typically sports means you're playing sport, not talking. So there's
no interaction at all.
Not enough to sustain kind of friendships. And it does take a while to make new friendships.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, so whereas in learning, you actually see the friendships that are forged over, say, a year and a half of doing a master's degree. These are lifelong friendships. You start realizing that even though you're facilitating get-togethers, they're seeing each other outside those get-togethers all the time. They're forming little groups of conversations and collaborating and doing things.
It's so true, because one of my best friends have come from university.
Yeah.
And some of the best, and actually university and flatting.
Yeah, but then you already have a common knowledge. And so there is the comfort place is to go back and talk about those things. Yeah. And the people you knew, and then there's the kind of the sort of connected of, oh, well, what's Johnny doing? You remember him from university, and he was the guy who did blah, blah. And you have some adjacency, but you don't really expand into a whole new area, because it's like a hard conversation to suddenly go, hey, what does everybody think about the economy? Like, it's not likely the thing you're going to do with your friends unless you've already got an economic kind of connection. Like, that's the topic that you would normally have. You typically fall back into the same types of things. Yeah.
It's fascinating how you've touched on many different facets of life and life stages, being the growth, the studying at university, the finding someone to marry, the deciding on children, and then questioning life at the 40s. Many people question a lot of life in 40s. Some people do it earlier, some people do it a bit later. So if someone is in that stage right now, is just questioning, and we talked about the steps that they can take in terms of what can they do next if they are questioning. I mean, one of the greatest things about what you were talking about as well is the collaboration really stood out for me with AcademyEX. Because it's not something like you're not sitting down and you're listening to someone speak. And funny enough, this is one of my values. Unofficially, it's my value. Because I used to like to sit and listen to someone talk about a subject. And then I moved from wanting to get a book, like a book club, and reading it myself and then discussing with somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I found that type of learning so much more effective. And I was able to, even though it was simpler, I wasn't maybe listening to some higher thoughts by someone who really knows more than me, but I couldn't apply what I was learning. I mean, I can still have the mix as well. I mean, it's okay. But having that mode of, I wanted to ask about that mode of learning, that collaborative learning. I think the word collaborative really came up a lot when I was looking up the type of work that you do. And I absolutely love that word. And talk to me more about that kind in terms of the classes that you guys have, and even if you have masterclasses that you do, your courses, how has that helped your students innovate?
So shared experiences and shared intelligence is a really big thing. So first of all, going back to the idea of your friends, the shared experiences is where you kind of then talk about and you stay. If you're a new shared experience, say you walked into a class and you were studying a micro-credential with us, and let's say it was in disruptive technologies. And the first thing you're hearing about for the first time is quantum computing. And you're like, I have no idea what quantum computing is. And the person next to you is like, I have no idea either. But now together you have a shared commonality that you're going, okay, we're starting from zero. And so then, by having someone coming in and kind of explaining, and then you're like, okay, and you're now in small collaborative groups talking about it, the application or what it might be, how it could change the future. Suddenly it's a case where you're discovering together. There's no boundaries. It's like this is an open conversation, and you might be hands-on, you might be drawing this out, you might be kind of imagining it in your mind, but this idea now, it sort of comes to life in front of you because it's now information you didn't have before, you now understand a little bit. And then if you're really interested, you can expand on it even more, and you might find someone next to you goes, hey, I'm really interested in this, and then you start having another conversation, a bit like a book club where you're like, hey, remember that chapter about when Penelope met Vivian and how that relationship was really kind of high conflict or whatever. So it's the same thing with learning. And actually, if you think about any shared experiences as a common sort of denominator, it means that you can always fall back to that. So the great thing about AI, and I don't want to overlabor AI, but it's a shared experience we're all going through. COVID was the ultimate shared experience. Obviously, for most people, it was incredibly negative because of the uncertainty. And, of course, a lot of people lost loved ones in really tough times. But the whole world had a shared experience. So we all had to figure out collectively what to do. A lot of life is not shared. And so with the problem seems much bigger. We all know the saying around, a problem shared is a problem halved. I'm a great believer of that. You share. But also if you're going into an environment where you don't feel in any way judged by going, I have no idea what this is about. And actually there's no one saying, oh, you should know this already. And I think that's what I love about postgraduate learning particularly is no one knows. It's all subjective. It's all kind of it's an opinion.
Quick one. Mina here. Thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. One thing that you can do for me is to please hit the subscribe button below. I promise you that if you hit subscribe, I'm going to work hard to make sure that my episodes are really good, that will get better and better. So, do we have a deal? Okay. Back to the episode. There's one that's happening on the 5th of August or 16th of August.
Yeah, so we have the way that a lot of people get into learning with us is through micro-credentials. So these are still credentialed, and they still earn credits, but you can stack them towards a master's degree. So you might be going, oh, I'm not sure about a master's degree yet. But you can do these micro-credentials, which are typically 10 weeks long. Some are a little shorter, some are a bit longer. And I think I'll probably call out 3 that may be really interesting to people listening to the podcast. So the first one is one we've been running for a number of years, which is Digital Skills for the Workplace. It's just 7 weeks, 2 one-hour sessions a week, and it's completely free. So it's been one that we've really focused on. So thousands of people who are just trying to understand digital skills and they would just want to be part of a community, like 100 people on the program together learning.
Wow. Is that in person or online?
It's online, but facilitated online.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so that's been going on. And look on their website, they'll see it runs regularly. And I say it's completely free. So really low friction. You could be in that group with digital skills for the workplace. The next one I think is really interesting is a micro-credential in entrepreneurship. And this is where every week over 10 weeks, so again, very just short 1.5 hour sessions, live facilitated with different entrepreneurs and actually kind of looking at, and then there's always a bit of flipped learning. So you do a little bit off, in between sessions, you're doing various things to support your business idea. But actually having that guidance of proven entrepreneurs and people who can help you with that journey. So that's another great option. And then thirdly, one that's coming up very soon is in disruptive technologies. And while I do some teaching these days, not a lot, this one I'm running myself. Like I'm literally running a 10-week program in disruptive technology. So roughly 100 people will join that program, and there is a very big AI focus. And the reason I'm doing this, and we've been running this program for a long time, is so many people keep coming to me saying, but how do I learn about AI? And so I thought, okay, here's the time. I will run this program and actually be the facilitator on it. So starting in August for 10 weeks, again, very much part-time, an hour and a half a week online. I'll be jumping in and teaching all about how artificial intelligence works in the workplace.
So it's ought to be amazing because you're bringing in 30 years, 40 years?
Too many years.
Too many years of hard-earned insights and knowledge and wisdom as well. What sort of tips do you have for future-proofing your business? Like now we're talking about, entrepreneurs. This podcast is also kind of geared towards people who are starting a business and wanting to scale a business. So if we're talking to these people now, like to the 30-year-old who's starting their own physiotherapy class or Pilates studio and want to be disruptive, and want to future-proof their business. How can they do that with the type of understanding that you have and the learning that you are so passionate about?
I mean, the first thing in good examples is, let's say, a Pilates studio. The most important thing is thinking about your customer first, so customer-centric. So how do you, as a person, want to book a class? So, there has to be a very pain-free way of booking and moving classes. I was a regular at Reformer classes last year, and I changed to another studio because I couldn't, this whole idea of having to go to a website and lodging and I couldn't move it became really frustrating. I changed to one that I could really easily accommodate my schedule, and if things moved, I could move it with it.
Yeah.
But also thinking about payments and actually how people discover you, like where are you most likely to be found. Really thinking through a digital lens. In the end, today most people are sort of saying, buying online, discovery online, being able to do trade, change, amend kind of purchases, delivery, everything you have, everything in that interface of online is really how you're going to grow a business. The more analog it is, the more you ask people to do the heavy lifting, the harder it is going to be to, first of all, attract, but to retain a customer.
Can I please pause and explore analog? And
sure.
What does that really mean for us?
Analog means that you have to phone someone to book in a session. So if you've got to go to a hairdresser and phone them and you can't see availability and you can't see your stylist, or if you need some new shampoo from it and you can't just go on their website and buy it and get it delivered to you, and you actually have to go to the salon to go and get it, or if you're a plumber, it means you have to stand, at the end of a line, you get a voicemail saying, I'm not busy, I'm busy right now, I'll call you back, and the next day you haven't heard back from them. Your business is going out of business. People need to know they need a response, even if it's just a very quick automated response and saying, I'll be right back to you, and then putting in all the systems. So autoresponders, chatbots, which are so easy today, having as much information on a website as possible so that people can do it. And for the individual customer, be able to have control the answer to what they need to do. So they should be able to self-discover, self-resolve, and actually not have to talk to a person at all. So that might be booking a plumber, cancelling a plumber, or changing an order. Whatever it is, it's not just the first approach, like, oh, I'm on Instagram, I get customers. It's like the whole way through that journey. So if they have to analog in that world is anything that is putting the onus on the individual to do heavy lifting, which might mean making a phone call, physically walking into a store, phoning to change an appointment. All of those things mean that you're already on a slippery slope away from kind of a good business. It also means if you ever decide to sell that business, no one's going to buy it, because actually as we get more and more digital, the buyers are younger. So whoever you sell it to is going to be younger than you are, and they're going to look at your business and go, where's your database? Where's your customer relationship management? Where is the system that you're actually nurturing? Where's your email? What email kind of exchange are you using? What messaging apps are you using? What e-commerce have you got? So what I see is a lot of people, they build up a business, but they build it on a very traditional model, and then they go to market, and everybody who is looking to buy a business is looking and saying, well, you're not a digital business. It has to be digital first. And so that is the biggest priority. And actually we have a very low uptake around SMEs, those small, medium businesses who just avoid digital, thinking it's super expensive. The reality is it's super expensive if you don't do digital, because you're really relying on people. They're saying this year will be the first time in the world you'll get a single person creating $1 billion business because of AI. Now, already we have it with less than 5 people, like 5 people creating $1 billion businesses. And this is like AI-ing everything. Now, I'm not suggesting people go and do that, but this is the world we live in, that people are creating these extremely successful, large businesses and just using all the digital tools available and actually making it so much is automated. Now, that's the extreme advance, sort of example. But if you're coming back saying, I'm trying to find out more about your business, and what I'm seeing online is out of date, or I have no way of contacting you, I can't reach you on the phone, even the fact on the phone. I mean, it does make me laugh the more I talk to people in their 20s who have never, ever used an analog phone in their life, like a phone in the office. And even on their mobile phones, people say, I've never called someone on my phone. Wow. So they might be like 22 years old and they've literally never used their phone as a phone.
Is there such thing that no one has ever used
their phone to call someone?
A 20-year-old or 22-year-old could have a phone and they've never made a phone call. The point is that you're making is get on the digital. If you're a business, you need to get on digital, and you need to make that clear to you, to your staff, because you're saying if you want to sell your business, who wants to buy an analog
business?
type business? Final thoughts for us, Francis, please, about some of your biggest learning in business, because you're at the end of the day, you're an entrepreneur, and part of many other things as well. What have you learned that changed your life so far in business?
I think the first one would be the people who are most negative about your business idea are your best people to talk to. Because in the end, there's going to be people who will challenge what you say, and then despite them, go ahead and do what you're thinking. If you can feel like you've got all the evidence, but it's always good to hear the people who say, these are the reasons I think your business will not be successful. The most successful businesses, of course, people ignore that advice, and I think there is an element of ignoring it, but you have to be willing to hear it. And the biggest challenge, I think, for people is when they've got a particular talent. Let's just say they're a really amazing hairstylist, and they decide to go and create a salon, and they're not realizing they don't like people management, they don't have a business background, they don't understand supply and demand, and actually can't think about how they, if you suddenly have a quiet period over Christmas and you don't have enough cash flow, you have to listen to the people who will say that to you, saying, hang on, you're a great stylist, but actually what marketing experience do you have? How much cash reserves do you have to do that marketing? How are you going to hire your first 2 people? What's the return on investment? You need the knowledge of those people who are the naysayers so that you can go and find the answers to those questions and then prove them wrong.
Francis, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an honor to have you here. Would love to have you again in the future. There's so much more to talk about, pages and pages. But for now, thank you, and all the best to your adventures that's coming soon.
Thank you so much.